What's up, folks? Michael here. Okay, so one of the things that gives food variety and makes it delicious is sauces. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of sauces that you can learn to whip up and add to any kind of food. Salad dressings are a kind of sauce. You got chimichurri you might be familiar with, which is an oil and herb concoction. That's a kind of sauce. You got pesto, salsa, tomato sauce. Just Google types of sauces and you're going to see it's endless. But today, I'm going to show you how to make 3 dips, which are also sauces, that are delicious and can be a challenge to get during the Whole Life Challenge since they're traditionally made with some non-compliant ingredients. And they are ranch, ketchup, and barbecue sauce. Now, the biggest issue with ketchup and barbecue sauce is that they are typically loaded with sugar, and then ranch is usually a dairy-based sauce. So first, we're not going to get away without sweetening the ketchup or the barbecue sauce at all. They won't taste right if we don't. We will, however, control the amount of sugar and the type by using whole dates rather than refined sugar. Now, first, to give credit where it's due, the ketchup and the barbecue sauce are recipes from a paleo cooking site called Against All Grain from a paleo chef named Danielle Walker. And the ranch is Dump Ranch from the Whole Sisters website. And we have some variations posted from some other creators as well. Now, they call it Dump Ranch because you can just dump all the ingredients into one container and go. So first, we're going to make the ranch. Now, I'm going to use an immersion blender to make mayonnaise as a part of this recipe. It is a great way to make homemade mayonnaise. It's much easier than using a whisk or a blender. Now, if you want, you can start with store-bought mayonnaise and just take out the oil, the egg, the lemon, and the vinegar from the recipe. This is a good option for vegans. You can use Vegenaise. But if you don't eat eggs or you don't want to eat raw eggs, there's an egg-free version in the recipe link in the description. So there's a couple of options there. Now, if you're not going to make the mayo, if you are using store-bought, you can actually just whisk all of this together. Ranch is really just a well-seasoned, creamy dressing that can be improvised with mayonnaise, herbs, spices, and then something to thin it out a little bit with. If you're just going to use pre-made mayonnaise, use a cup of mayonnaise instead of the ingredients, the oil, the egg, the lemon, and the vinegar. Now, you're going to find that you're going to need to adjust the consistency to your liking, so you're going to use water or some kind of milk alternative. So, into my tall and narrow receptacle, you have to use this to make mayonnaise with an immersion blender. You cannot just use a bowl. I'm going to use what came with the immersion blender, but you can also use a wide mouth mason jar, which again is perfect to store the ranch when you're done. This is going to create a vortex that pulls the ingredients together bit by bit. So I already have in here 1 cup of oil and 1 egg in the container. And to that, I am going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice and 2 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. I'm going to add a teaspoon each of salt and pepper. I'm going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon each of onion and garlic powder. And then I am going to add 2 tablespoons of water. Now, I definitely want this thinner than mayonnaise. The water is going to help with that. If I want thinner when I'm done, I can continue to thin at the end until I'm satisfied. Now, I'm saving the herbs here for later in the process because if I add them now, the whole thing's just going to turn green while I'm blending it. So you can see here the oil and the egg are at the bottom, and I want to immerse the immersion blender completely, all the way down. You want the head to be fully submerged and the egg is in the middle. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start blending. Now you're going to, as it thickens up, I'm going to move upwards slowly. Wow, you can see it really is going right away. I don't really want to move a lot faster than the mayonnaise is forming because I don't want it to break apart. So you can see this is forming pretty quickly. I'm going to give it about 45 seconds before I'm going to say I'm satisfied with how thick this is. Now you can see this is not, or I can see, it's not nearly as thick as a traditional mayonnaise, and that's because I've added the water. So that water gives me just about the consistency that I want. So now that that is completely blended, at this point I'm going to go ahead and add the herbs. You can add fresh herbs. I've got 3 tablespoons of dried herbs. I've got chives, parsley, dill. I've got cilantro and basil. I'm going to go ahead and add that, and I'm going to blend it for about 15 seconds, just long enough to really get everything distributed and not so long that it turns green. If you don't want to do that, you can just go ahead and you can whisk those in when you're done. So that's your 1-minute dump ranch, and then you can use that with fresh veggies or with chicken wings, which I will show you in a later video. Now let's move on to the ketchup. So first I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse off my immersion blender because I'm going to also use it for the ketchup, and I don't want all sorts of ranch in my ketchup. So I've got all my ingredients here. For both ketchup and the barbecue sauce, we're going to have soaked some dates in warm water for about 15 minutes to soften them up. Make sure they're pitted. Now, like the ranch, we're going to add all the ingredients to a blender and puree them until it's smooth. But when that's done, the mixture is going to get cooked for about 30 minutes, where it's going to reduce and thicken up and create the flavor. So, ranch dressing. So I'm going to do one of these. I'm going to do the ketchup here. It's the same preparation for both. Now, the links to all the recipes are in the description. Just the barbecue sauce requires a little bit more spices, takes some more measuring. This one was easier for me. Now, one thing I want to mention is an ingredient called fish sauce. Fish sauce is a kind of off-putting ingredient on its own, but it's a really great ingredient for adding savory richness to dishes. So having a small bottle in your fridge is actually a good thing for home cooks. So if you don't have it, don't be afraid to buy a small bottle and then use it in things like soups or stews, braises or meatloafs, anything you want more savory richness to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add all the ingredients to this pot I'm cooking in, since I'm going to use the immersion blender instead of a blender. So I've already got the tomato puree in there. Now this is 3 cups of tomato puree, which is what the recipe calls for. I'm also going to go ahead and I'm going to add the soaked dates. Then I'm going to add my water. I'm going to add my vinegar. I'm going to add my tomato paste. And it calls for 4 tablespoons. That is 1/4 cup. And then a combination of garlic and onion powder, sea salt, ground mustard powder, not mustard, ground clove, and allspice. Now, you may not have clove and allspice. You don't want to be afraid to buy that. It's really good warming spice for winter stuff. So don't be afraid to buy them if you don't have them. You can do some great compliant baked stuff in the holidays. Now, I'm going to puree this for about 3 minutes, and then I'm going to cook it for about 30. So give me 3 minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay, so it's been 3 minutes. You really want to give it that full 3 minutes because you want to make sure that those dates are fully pureed and fully incorporated. Now that it's pureed, you can see it's a totally smooth consistency, but it's still pretty thin. It's much thinner than I might want for ketchup. That's the consistency before I cook. The cooking is going to thicken it up. It's going to make it richer. So I'm going to put it here and I'm going to simmer it for 30 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll look at that and see what the final ketchup looks like. Okay guys, it's been about 30 minutes and this has been simmering all along. Now, one thing that I should have mentioned was you're going to want to cover this pot a little bit. The simmer here is more like a sputter. It's going to take 5 or 10 minutes to come up to a simmer, but you're going to want to keep it partially covered so it doesn't splatter all over the kitchen while it cooks. Make sure you leave it partially uncovered for evaporation. So here, you can see when I'm done, I've got something that's darker and thicker. It's much richer than the original product. The cooking process is going to make the tomatoes much more savory as well. Raw tomatoes are really bright and acidic, and the cooked tomatoes are much more rich and savory. So this is my finished ketchup. It's much different from when we started. Now this is going to keep in the fridge for about 2 weeks. But don't worry, if you have extra, you can freeze it for, I don't know, like 6 months. You know, make sure that you cool it on the counter. Stir stuff when you cool it so the hot stuff from the middle gets onto the outside while it cools. But make sure everything is cooled before you go ahead and put it in the fridge. Now, if you're going to freeze it in a bag, freeze it flat so it doesn't take up much space. You're going to fill a plastic bag, zip it closed, squeeze out the air, and then lay it flat to freeze it. And when you're done, you're going to have a nice flat, sort of flat thing of ketchup. You can thaw it overnight in the fridge, you can throw it in the microwave, you can throw it in a saucepan when you need it. Same deal with the barbecue sauce. Yes, fresh foods do not last as long as the stuff you buy in the store, but you're going to make it as you need it, and you'll know exactly what's in it, and that's really what's important. So those are the dips. We got ranch, we got ketchup. We didn't do the barbecue sauce, but you make it just like the ketchup. The recipe links for all of them are in the description. Enjoy the flavors. Please throw comments down below and let us know what you think of the dips. Happy eating, and I'll see you next time.